Hello everybody and welcome to my sunroom. It's a cloudy day here in East Tennessee. We've had a little bit of a break from the very cold weather, which is always appreciated, and we're more than halfway through winter now. My orchid room is blooming. Some are in bloom and some are about to bloom, and everyone sees the blooms, and now is the time when people ask me, why isn't my orchid blooming? So we're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to give you some ideas about how to get your orchids to rebloom. So what makes an orchid bloom? Light, nutrients, great water, correct temperatures, and consistent, persistent care. The correct growing medium. These are all the main things to consider when you're growing orchids to get them to rebloom for you. The first thing your orchid needs to rebloom is enough light. That goes for any plant that blooms, not just for orchids. For most orchids, eastern-facing windows are absolutely the best, or dispersed light in a western-facing window. We've talked a lot on my channel in the last few months about light, so I'll provide a link for you in the description box below about my latest video on light. You can get everything on an orchid right. You can water and fertilize it. You can repot it correctly. You can nurture it. But if it doesn't get enough light, it won't bloom. Keep in mind that if your orchid didn't grow new foliage this year, if you didn't get new leaves on your phals and vandas, new canes on your dendrobiums and cattleyas, they probably won't bloom. I've never seen one bloom without new growth every year. And if your orchid doesn't have enough leaves, they won't bloom. Or if they do, it won't be a prolific bloom. You'll usually just get a few blooms, usually, because orchids do tend to surprise us. An important thing to keep in mind is that orchids need a cool down period in the fall. Especially for Phalaenopsis orchids, they have to have a 10 to 15 degree Fahrenheit temperature cool down period to spike. That's an 8-degree change in Celsius. Many people, like I do, we keep our home temperatures very stable between the season changes with our heating and cooling systems, and our orchids don't get the message to rebloom. So I take this room, my sunroom, and I make it work. If you can use one room that you can keep the temperatures cool at night in the fall, it will tell your orchids to rebloom. I'm going to explain what happens in my sunroom so that you'll see what I mean. I'm going to give you temperatures in both Fahrenheit and in Celsius. Okay, so in the summer, my grow room here stays around 80 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 26 to 27 degrees Celsius during the day. I have my air conditioner on at that time. And then it cools down to about 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 23 degrees Celsius at night. So there's not much of a temperature change there at all. The temperatures remain very steady. Then about mid-September, the nights cool down here quite a bit to about 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 to 20 Celsius. The days are still quite warm, between 80 to 82 degrees. So during this time, I don't heat my sunroom at night, or I heat it up to just about 65 degrees. I allow my room to stay about 65 degrees at night for about 2 months, especially since I want double spikes. For single spikes, they need to have these lower temps for at least 2 weeks. And for double spikes, they need those lower night temps for at least 6 weeks. So mine get those lower night temps for about 2 months, so I'm assured that I'm going to get as many spikes as I possibly can. I keep a close eye on the temperatures in this room in the fall. So you keep this in mind as the year progresses and be prepared to monitor for this in the early fall. But fall is already past us, so how can you mimic this in the middle of the winter? One idea is to put the orchid in the coolest room in your house at night. I have a high-low temperature gauge that is really helpful to use in a grow room. So during the day, you could move the orchid to your warmest room of your house and try to get that 10 to 15 degree difference between your day and night temperature. Do that for about 2 weeks and see if that works. Keep in mind that 55 degrees is the minimum temperature for your Phalaenopsis orchids. Any lower than that and the orchid could suffer tissue damage. I would also change the way I fertilize if the orchid hasn't bloomed in a year or two. I would withhold the nitrogen, the Better Grow Orchid Plus, and water it with only CalMag, 10 to 15 drops per gallon, and seaweed extract, the Grow More seaweed extract at 30 drops per gallon, and wait for about a month and see what happens. Another thing that usually comes to mind with me is, does the orchid need to be repotted? A lot of times when it needs a new home, it just simply won't bloom. And just the process of repotting it can wake up the orchid. And another thing you could try is to water the orchid every day with warm water for about a week. I think this is some signal that nature may provide for them in the rainforest where they live. I know that October is the rainy season in some rainforest areas, so maybe it mimics the rainy season for them, and then they know they need to bloom. But it's definitely worth a try. If the orchid is growing in bark, this is easier than if it's growing in moss. I wouldn't flood the moss every day. I would just provide a small drink of warm water. And if your orchid is growing in water culture, you could try just changing out the water every day with warm water and see what happens. I'm hoping this gives you all some helpful hints about how to get your orchids to rebloom. And as always, I appreciate all of you for watching and for all of your kind and helpful comments on my channel. I hear back from so many of you that you share my videos to help others who are growing orchids, and that's such a great compliment to me, and I thank you so much. And so before I close the video, I'd love to say the blessing over you and your family and your orchids. May the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you, and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you and your family his shalom peace. You all make it a great day, and we'll see you next time.